Hey guys, I'm going to be getting into David Fincher's The Social Network, which he released in the year 2010. And yeah, this is a masterpiece that still continues to be ahead of my time because, I feel like in a lot of ways, this really is kind of the modern Godfather in a lot of ways, in the sense that there really is like a rise and a real fall. And I think it actually is a very personal rise and fall that really does speak to me and a lot of people in my generation who you could say got into social media for the sense of just optimistic communication with people, and that's kind of what happened. But now it is kind of the gothic horror story of, well, like 10 years later, at least for my circle, it usually just turns into, okay, you don't really use it else, use it for some film communication and some ties, but most of the time I get on Facebook in particular, okay, masturbate over a couple of women that were giving me permission, that's it. So now that I see that, I think that's what told me back from. I think because the ending heavily is symbolic for that. The man goes through this whole journey. He goes through this big thing that's wise and it's genius, but you know what it's all for? He doesn't get to be around a particular woman that he's absolutely craving to be around. In the end. And oh my God, if y'all look at it now like that, now that I announce it, I will reject a lot of that so I can further see what it takes to honestly pursue. That's but man's life takes it. It's all about patience about it, but there's also that desire too. It's in every single man. I have a very, very eccentric way of getting there. So, from just a lot of denial in the past, it kind of has turned into like a habit of that. Just I get my satisfaction of not wanting to be around a girlfriend, but insecure because jerking off the Facebook pictures. So, yeah, there's a downfall here that is true for me. That is so true that it's intimidating to even talk about this film, but it must be done. And now that I've announced all this and say all this, well, let's look at it a little differently moving forward. It's sort of the way I like to do all this and see all this. David Fincher was onto something that's very forward thinking and how. Facebook, it really is one of the most important websites of all time. It goes beyond words as far as just kind of something that's very appealing. There's just something very relatable about this entire film, the way that it's explored. It's kind of like this guy is a genius, but he never finds what makes him happy. That's kind of what he goes through this entire way. It's like a creative person. Very, very detail oriented, much like how director David Fincher is operating, a uniquely detail oriented perspective. That's the thing. I first saw this when I was like 16. I think 16 when I was 17. I was somewhere in that age range when this first came out. I instantly loved it, but then it's like I didn't think about it so much throughout the most of the 2010s. A lot of other films were a little louder, but I think I honestly just needed some time to be honest with myself to love this film as much as come back to it as, okay, this is a perfectly groundbreaking masterpiece that goes beyond being entertaining, but it's also important and timeless. And I mean, Jesse Eisenberg really does play this role like he was born to play it. It's sort of this. It's like he's unlikable, he's pretentious, but he also is, you can kind of see, okay, lonely. It stems from harsh loneliness, in a lot of ways. Things come back to haunt him in a lot of ways. Like he makes some friends, he ends up kind of betraying some friends along the way, It's like, for what? For nothing. I mean, it really is something here. And all these different characters, again, Justin Timberlake played Sean Parker. That's really a perfect choice because he really does kind of have a Justin Timberlake-like personality where it's almost like the eccentric pop artist, in a lot of ways, kind of killing right out of him. But it's just something very comfortable and familiar about the way David Fincher just portrays this vision. It's like a kind of a dark, gloomy. It makes Facebook feel kind of gloomy because it's capturing this time period in 2003. And I think that's a unique time period, like right before all this came around. The question often is, are we better off or are we worse off with the Facebook? I'm going to say still better because it's better to take out whatever those tendencies really rise. I think for a lot of men, it's better to take it out through Facebook than it is through, I think, seriously dangerous outlets. I think that's where there's the benefit. Obviously, there's no one around to tell you that's not take it too far. So now I'm starting to listen to myself, very limited. And the urge rise intensely. No more 5 minutes because that needs to be honed in on finding a real only forever. Because at the end of the day, even if you don't want to say it to yourself, there's like a desperation and a yearning for something more whenever that action is going on. It's hard to admit that. It's a lot of confidence can get down to that newfound joy for yourself. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something very original about the way the whole film is laid out. It's like sometimes it is to kind of be too much of a try-hard perfectionist, as I've seen a lot of myself come out through making this film. So it's like it kind of just portrays something of, well, that he's not happy. It's like, why, at the end of the day, even if I deny it a lot, it's like, why do I want that end result for myself? I think I deny it because I find a source of creativity, but I'm starting to see the second film take it more seriously. Enough artists come around and make it clear, enough signs. Something is missing, so just time to admit that always. Yeah, this is definitely my second favorite David Fincher film. I mean, I think Zodiac has the slightly preferred, but I think this is. And honestly, another film this reminds me of is like Wolf of Wall Street, which came around. That was like the louder film. I realized this is the better film to me because it is more subtle and it is more personal. It's like that's the kind of personal, like that's unlike a Jordan Belfort outfit, like all that excessive drug and sex and past. That's great to say. That's all. It's just too much. 3 hours of that excess is a little bit overboard. I think, compared to other Martin Scorsese films. But this, however, David Fincher is kind of just capturing a similar perspective, but from a lonely genius, basically. A lonely genius who ends up kind of making the right connections, and he ends up just landing massive success. Like the film's not really about Facebook at all. I mean, it's literally just about everything around the creation of it, and it's extremely entertaining how I mean, this really is just like a modern sense of just a perfect screenplay, and it just feels like right away you can just relate to all these characters the way it's written. There's a lot of fast, snappy, topic dialogue, but it's always just interesting. You know, and that's kind of what drives this entire film in a lot of ways. Like it's very entertaining. Great soundtrack too. I mean, I love the Trent Reznor score. It's very different. It's like it feels like Trent Reznor was in a calmer mood by this point. I think doing some soundtrack scores just made him a lot more refined. That's my favorite shade of him. I prefer this shade of him over the Nine Inch Nails era. Honestly, stuff he was doing with David Fincher is really great. But it's like a film about obviously, a film about Facebook shouldn't be this interesting, but it's everything around it. You know, it ends up being very symbolic for a lot of them. Just modern American culture. I can relate to a lot of this. You know, it's just very relatable. Sometimes you have to. I think growing up to see there's an asshole side to a person. I think this film does represent a certain asshole that can live in a person. Myself, that's not talked about a lot often. You know, because I mean, Facebook can definitely be a source of like addiction, as well as you kind of see here. It's like you're getting lost into this certain feeling, and you're missing something that was important along the way. You know, so that's kind of what social networks kind of all about. Um, I really love this film. It really ends perfectly. You're just like in the end, he's just refreshing over and over again just to see if a girl will confirm this friend request. You know, that's like, oh gosh, it can feel low and pathetic to me personally. And it's like, okay, when I sit back and realize to this day I'm doing something to that effect, it's like, oh, what are you waiting for? I don't know. I guess it's a feeling, that's I thought it was sports based, but now it's been transitioned awkwardly to hormones. It's like, oh, now that I see that 100% clearly, back away, tread lightly, let that be for you, not for your own spirituality, not gift it too hard to another person who doesn't need all that. It's like, oh, the script is perfect. Yeah, and it's just like, yeah, no one's too likable in this one too. I like how there's just like everyone's a slight bit of a scumbag, and I love that though. Like about the film, it kind of feels a lot. Again, another film that's slightly similar reminds me of a little bit is There'll Be Blood as far as just that goes, where it's like building your way up into this empire, but you're never really happy. But you're somehow the film is honing in on how fascinating it all is, but it's also aware about that hole that's in it. Perhaps David Fincher was lending a lot of his own loneliness to this kind of film. Just oh man. It's really not better. It's 100 times better than it sounds. It's just one of those films you kind of just got to see how it plays out for yourself. It's really entertaining. It's always fast paced in its own kind of way. Um, it's like a very isolated kind of genius kind of at play. And like literally, but lonely, kind of a stubborn guy. Like again, it's like another take on again just something that's very addicting in a lot of ways. But it's like overcoming that addiction and just consistent your faith and something greater than yourself. I think that's what it all comes down to. Listen to the forces that feel rotten rather than beautiful whenever you're in those depths of addiction, It's like those will kind of meant to tell you that there's something better for you, but you have to kind of ask for it in a lot of ways. It doesn't just come to you, in a lot of ways. It's kind of what a lot of this feels like. But yeah, I mean, that's just the way it goes. That's the social network's beauty. I mean, it's a very original film about making a lot of friends, but turn out to be like enemies in the long run. So it's just kind of a very modern look at a very Greek tragedy, you could say, in a lot of ways. Just look at how far things have come. I love this film. It really is quite a perfect masterpiece that only catches up to me more and more at times. So, yeah, I recommend this one to everybody. It is a modern masterwork.